So, welcome to another episode of Sigmore Says. I'm your host, Alexis Carner, and this is my co host, Kennedy Williamson. And this week, we will be discussing overuse injuries in high school sports. Okay.
So first of all, would you agree with the claim that high school athletes are being overused? And by saying this, I mean that they are repetitively getting injured and over time, and they're just beginning to be worn out.
Yes, I would agree with that statement, only because they are currently a lot of athletes that get injured every single time they play their sport.
Exactly. What would you say would be a way to fix this problem?
Since this is something we're gonna be talking about in our debate later on, I just want to start off by saying just taking them out for just the rest of the season, just to give their body time to heal. Okay, to start off with, my question is, what do you think should be done about overuse injuries?
I think definitely there will be more on this topic during our debate, but I would have to agree with pulling them out of the sport at some range, but I think we have differences in opinions on the timing and how long they'd be pulled out. Another thing would just be better teaching techniques and more self awareness and knowing when there's a problem and encouraging athletes to just take some rest and letting them know that it's okay to not play a game or to not play a certain amount of games because in the end it's better for them to be safe than for them to win a game.
Yeah, and also another question would be sports with the increased risk of overuse injuries come from practices and not competition. Why do you think this is true?
From a personal story or a little background, I have witnessed people mess around during practices more, and I have witnessed people getting injured from stupid things that happen at practice because a lot of times practices is more about practicing the technique or going all out on something that you've just learned, which can be rough at times because your body sometimes isn't ready for new things or like I said, messing around, proper things aren't happening when you think that they should be. So I can understand why people are claiming this to be true.
Yeah. And studies show that overuse injuries represented by 13.3% of all injuries were from girls, but only 5.5% of those were in boys. Why do you think it's more common in girls than boys?
One thing I would have to say about this topic is that girls generally play the less aggressive sports. By this I mean softball and volleyball and even track and field. And by this I don't mean that they're not competitive, but the equipment that they use and the protection that they use is nothing compared to football, which is a male predominantly played
Just
sport.
like girls lacrosse and all they wear is the eye thing, where the guys wear full on padding.
Because helmets that are used in softball could protect the same things that helmets protected in football, but football players have much more padding and there's much more protection in them because the entire body is known to be injured during a very intensive sport like that, rather than in volleyball, you see a lot of back and knee injuries, and the only really protection that you have in volleyball is knee pads, and that's just cushioning you from a fall. But over time, these lacks of unprotected bodies is what is causing these high school athletes and athletes in general to be overused and worn down.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. And going off that a little bit with injuries and stuff, lower leg injuries was the most frequent site of overuse injuries. Why do you think this?
I would have to say that going back to the types of sports that plays a big role into it. And I know a lot of times minor injuries, which build up into these bigger injuries like we're talking about today, go unnoticed. And for example, people would get shin splints from constantly doing the same thing in track and field or constantly starting a race the wrong way or what have you. But those are the little things that happen over time that lead to the bigger issue. And with any kind of sport, any athlete will get tired. Their bodies will just
Hmm.
start to get worn out, and they just think it was from a rough practice or like a hard game. They knew that they like had to try a little extra harder to win or to get that goal or whatever. But in reality, it's really an actual injury, which is going unnoticed.
Yeah, definitely. And this is another topic that we're going to be discussing with our debate, but just to do like a little brief thing is it says that more than half of the athletes were evaluated by someone other than an athletic trainer, and 49.8 of those percent evaluated by an athletic trainer alone. Do you believe an athletic trainer should be present?
Definitely because they're the ones who are going to see the injury. I would have to disagree in them only being the only provider seeing the injury or um, having checkups with the patient because I do think that other influences need to be
Hmm.
brought on. But having an athletic trainer at all practices and games will be very beneficial for scenarios like this where someone will get injured and they're going to be the first ones that can um, take care of the patient. And another thing is, I feel like athletic trainers are the ones that are going to realize that if a person has a chronic injury or not, because athletes will go on and see them and want request the same type of treatment, and then so then they start to think, okay, like something bigger is wrong. Maybe there's more of a chronic issue or a stress fracture, or like they have back problems because they keep wanting to come in and be heated. So just things like that. I feel like athletic trainers are part of the key to bringing more awareness to this issue.
Yeah, and just like that, many say that athletic trainers only tape ankles. It just shows that
Hmm.
they don't just tape
They
ankles.
do much more, and athletic trainers really are kind of the backbones of each team because they're the ones that are
Hmm.
there taking care of the student athletes or athletes in general, and making sure that they aren't potential patients because no one wants to go into a game asking to get hurt. So it's good to have that preventative person there.
Exactly. Okay, I think that is all the questions that we have had, but now I think we're going to go into the debate. Do you want to start us off, Kennedy?
Um, I believe that after an athlete has been injured and becomes a patient for chronic injury or even illness that they could have gotten, that they should be pulled indefinitely from the sport. Would you have to agree with that, or do you believe differently?
I disagree with that. Like, I agree that they should be pulled, but I don't think it should be indefinite. I think that pulling them for like the rest of the season, or if it was like the last game of the season, then pulling them just make keep them from playing like the first few games, the first few practices,
Mm-hmm.
because it because like I see like what you say, like pulling them out, but they're still young, like they're still in high school, and like they still have their whole futures ahead of them. And I know a lot of them like they love like their sport, like they've been playing it for like their entire lives. So just like pulling them out indefinitely, like it's just gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt them, I think, more mentally than even like physically too. It's gonna hurt them too. But like and like waiting like a season or a little bit longer than that sometimes could just it gives their bodies more time to heal and then they can get back into it is what I
So,
think.
are you basically saying that once they are cleared by, per se, like a medical doctor, um, that that's a sign that they're able to play again?
No, like yes, like usually like doctors say like even with like concussions, usually like a week after like symptoms are clear before like they can get back into play. But I think they should be done just for like the entire full season. Because even like the doctor says like you're clear like after a week of the injury, I say like give their bodies, yeah, like say like they're clear, but there might not be clear like mentally, or like it's not just about physically. You have to like go through it all. That's why I think if you give them like the entire season to heal, I think then they'll be ready to play again.
Um, what about the fact that this is like about chronic injuries, so stuff that are easily reoccurring, and even if it is healed, whatever body part is still more susceptible to have that injured again, and that's why I believe that they should be pulled indefinitely from some sports depending on the injury. Another thing that I feel like is a key part in high school sports is like the mental attitude. And I feel like there are so many people who would love to play the sport, but they don't because they might not be the best. And these injured athletes that are deemed the best players are just playing to play. They're playing to win when there's all these other people out here that could have the chance to play the sport because in the end it is
Mm-hmm.
all for fun and to learn about the sport and to learn about themselves as an athlete or even as a person in society. So I believe it's much more than just them like recuperating and going back to the game. There's
Yeah.
much more that I feel like proves that depending on the extent of the injury, that some people should just be pulled and be ineligible to play because the likelihood of them playing professionally probably isn't that great. And yeah, I get it is a good um, thing to do to improve
Mm-hmm.
different social aspects and to improve your character, but there are other things other than sports that people could be involved
Yeah,
in.
like I see what you're saying, but like also like these sports like these athletes are playing in high school, it's not just about like the winning or losing or like the chance of going pro in the future, which yes is like slim to none, but if you also think about like it gives them a lot more than um just like physical activity. It like creates like bonds and friendships and like some people like call them like their brothers or like their sisters, their teammates. Like it's more than just like there's no I in team. Like it's everyone together. Like so that's why I think like if you pull them out indefinitely, like they will feel like separated from the team. And I feel like some of them might lose like friendships that way because like they are separated and they don't have like the inside jokes that like occur and happen during practice.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. What was the other question that you're wanting to debate about?
About the fact about whether or not athletic trainers should be should evaluate all athletes or should um, it just be solo athletic trainers or solo doctors? What's your stance on that?
I definitely think that there should be more of a doctor presence because yes, athletic trainers are the ones that are going to see the patients over and over again and they might know their daily life, but there is no rule stating that they must go see a doctor unless it is something that needs immediate attention. People could or trainers could suggest to go see a doctor or send them to a specialist, but that person might never show up. They might not think it's that bad and not want their own doctor to see it, which really um, harms the athlete themselves because their doctor isn't it's out he's out of the loop. He or she would be out of the loop and doesn't know what's going on. So when you go to provide the best care as a healthcare profession, they they don't know a key part of
Mm-hmm.
an athlete's life.
Yeah, like I see like where you're coming from, but I think an athletic trainer should evaluate all athletes no matter like what like the injury is because like if let's take a look at like the Tommy story, like how Tommy had like that really bad like injury like to his neck, and if the athletic trainer wasn't there or the athletic trainer didn't know like what had happened, like he could have died. Like that athletic trainer that was there and present is the one that first evaluated him and the first one that was out there on the field. She is the person that saved Tommy's life. So if I think we could have more like things like that or like more stories like that if an athletic trainer did like evaluate them and um the athletic trainer goes to every practice, athletic trainers go to every like sporting event, everything to ensure like the safety of these athletes and they're always the first responders. So
One thing that I think would be very beneficial is having athletic teams be forced to go see their family doctors or either like one specific specialist that would come in and evaluate all of them and tell the athletic trainer rather than just a team doctor because they might have some bias or people might be more likely to hide things. Because coming from personal experience with playing sports and working with sports teams is there's a very big pride issue and injury to some athletes is shows a form of weakness because you think you should be the strongest and the best and the
Mhm.
most likely to, like I said, win a game, and people don't want to be injured because they'll be like, oh, like he or she can't handle this, he or she can't doesn't have enough endurance, or they can't play as well in this, for like they should just quit or what have you. But I feel like that really gets to the emotional, um, that gets into a player's emotions and kind of going back to this like um, self awareness and like knowing when you need to stop. And people just look down at themselves when they get hurt sometimes, and I feel like um, having like a doctor report to the coaches or an athletic department on how patients and students athletes actually are would be very beneficial to any team. And I mentioned earlier having other people who might not be the best players sub in or stuff like that. I feel like that would really allow those people to get other chances because over time, if you are injured and you are the best player, you're really not the best player because you wouldn't want to have someone go out there and potentially miss a play or not play as well because they're injured. And that just
Mhm.
goes back to throwing these people in just because they're deemed the best of the best.
Yeah, like I see like where you're coming from and all that, and like I understand like they should go see a like real doctor too, as well as like an athletic trainer. But I think like they should see like the athletic trainer too, because the athletic trainer is, like I said, the first person there, and like they should, yes, go see a doctor afterwards, because the athletic trainers, many of them only have like their master's degree. Like some of them do have their doctorates, yes, but not all of them do. And like the doctors also, like, they don't just see athletes. Like many doctors also see, like, some of them work like in the ERs, and like they see a bunch of other patients too. So like they have like busy lives too. So like if they first go like the athletic trainer, then the doctor, then the doctor can report like any like their findings or whatever to their athletic trainer. So like they're all in that like one interlooping like circle to achieve like the best care for those athletes.
Yeah, but one thing I would have to add onto your point is people tend to be almost like they're friends with their athletic trainer, so they might think, oh, like he or she doesn't know this because they're just gonna tell the coach. And I feel like with seeing someone who isn't tied to an athletic team or they might specialize in sports medicine or something, but goes back to who you know and sports doctors, like they are there for the extra help of the athletic trainer, and they might be able to like diagnose right then and there, but at like more of a family practice or um, even like how the medical field has general surgeons who can deal with everything. I feel like sending athletes and clients and patients to somewhere that doesn't have any ties with the team or even sports at all would really be helpful because if someone is like, I don't want to say forced, but for the lack of better words, forced to tell them what is wrong, um, it would be okay if the athletes like knew that they had to go in and they knew what would happen, but just as long as they don't know what they might, what the coach would be hearing, because I feel like they might have a better chance of knowing what an athletic trainer would say just because they know them better as a person.
Yeah, but like it also goes back to the fact, like, if you send them to like a family doctor and they don't have like any ties with like the sports team at all, then how does the athletic trainer know when they can actually like go back to the game of field, or like even like go back, because the athletic trainer isn't just like the beginning person. They're also there at the end to make sure that they are fully like healed. They're the ones that continuously like tape their ankles or continuously like check up on them to make sure. So like how do you like keep an athlete trainer like out of loop on somebody, and they wouldn't know when they can allow this athlete to go back into play?
I wouldn't say that the athletic trainers are out of the loop, but I feel like they should be um, less on the diagnosing side with more serious injuries like this because they see many people who are having the same thing, so like they know that there's a problem.
Mhm.
And yes, they do a lot of right then and there, like um, saving and prevention, so they're definitely needed in this field. But I think that going back to the unbiased
Yeah.
part of it, I feel like that's a big deal, and it just is a combination of comfort levels and stuff like that.
Yeah. I agree with that. But I think that is all we have time for today for this episode of Sycamore Says. Tune back into next week's episode.